So good evening friends and welcome to 14th edition of Ada Advantage. Today we have very relevant topic of state planning and we have with us Rupesh Satnaniwala to speak on the subject. Uh, Mr. Satnaniwala is a Managing Director and CEO of Universal Trustees Private Limited. He is a chartered accountant with 20 years of experience. He had extensive experience in the field of retail banking, capital markets, private banking and state planning services. Prior to joining Universal Trustees, he has worked with ICICI Bank for 16 years, of which the last 10 years has been in private banking business. He in fact touched upon almost all aspects of private banking, including relationship management, marketing, product development, strategy, operations, and business compliance. This has given him holistic view of all facets of client management, both in the front end, product design, process management. He is also a qualified cost accountant from ICWAI and a certified financial planner from FPSB. So over to you, Mr. Naliwalji, and very warm welcome to you.
Thanks, Pankaj, and thanks everyone for joining in. Pankaj, I hope I'm audible. Yeah. So this subject of estate planning, I know all of it is important for all of us, but it has never been really urgent. However, in the current uncertain times, this subject has also gained a lot of urgency in people. And that is the reason we thought that we will create awareness about how you can go about estate planning and primarily what are wills, some misconceptions about wills, and that I will unravel as we go through. So what is estate planning? Estate planning refers to how do we arrange to transfer our wealth during our lifetime or after we are not there, right, to our loved ones or to whomsoever we want to give our wealth. And the definition has not got expanded to even include preservation of wealth during our lifetime. What can we do to preserve our wealth during our lifetime? So that's what estate planning is. Why should one do estate planning, right? First and foremost, it ensures that we can seamlessly transfer our wealth to our loved ones, right? To our spouses, children, parents, whomsoever we want to give. They can get the wealth in a very hassle-free manner and in a very seamless manner. Second, it enables us to ensure that we can transfer our wealth to the people we want to transfer our wealth. If we don't do a proper estate planning, some people may inherit our wealth whom we do not want to inherit. And I'll explain this as we go ahead as to what happens if you don't do anything. Who are the people who can get your wealth, and it maybe have unintended consequences. Third, it helps protect the wealth, because nowadays, most of us being in businesses or being in senior positions in corporates, there are a lot of liabilities that comes in, and there are ways one can plan to ring fence the wealth and protect the wealth. And it also ensures that it minimizes family disputes. And I will share you some data. 70% of court cases pertaining to property matters are matters which result in just because people have not even done a basic estate planning of writing their wills.
Rupesh, you have to be a bit louder.
Okay. And last but not the least, it helps us ensure that we are able to achieve our philanthropic goals. Most of us have this view that we want to do some charitable purposes and charitable activities. By planning ourselves properly, we can ensure that those goals are also achieved. Now, before we get into how you can do estate planning, I just wanted to touch upon this subject of what are the complexities of estate planning in India. Why does estate planning become so complex in India? First and foremost, India does not have any uniform civil code, right? So depending upon which religion I belong to, how I got married, a relevant succession law will be applicable to me. So to Hindus who are married, the relevant succession law applicable is the Hindu Succession Act. Similarly, for Christians and Parsis, it becomes the Indian Succession Act. For Muslims, it is the Sharia law. In case of inter-religion marriage, when it is registered under the Special Marriage Act, again an Indian succession law becomes applicable. So because of the lack of uniform civil code, one has to also see how the person got married, which religion was, whether what was happened before conversion, after conversion, and that adds to the complexity. Secondly, in some regions follows a different law altogether. Goa is the only state in India which has a uniform civil code. So irrespective of the religion you follow or religion you belong to, if you are in Goa, it has a uniform law, succession law for everybody residing in Goa. And that means that all the assets of husband and wife are treated as community asset, as a common assets of both of them. Then as I mentioned, the effect of marriage on inheritance. So a marriage has a big role to play in how the assets will go, especially when there is an inter-religion marriage, because the inter-religion marriage will result in often than not, the marriage getting registered under the Special Marriage Act, wherein the Indian succession law will apply and not the Hindu succession law. And it will also depend upon whether the marriage happened basis conversion or it was done without a conversion. Recognition to live-in relationships. I think this is becoming now also a matter of concern in a lot of families, where when children are having a live-in relationships, there has been court judgments where courts have recognized that the live-in partner has been given equal rights to that of a spouse. So one needs to also factor in case there is anybody who is in a live-in relationship, as to what impact it can have on the estate plan and on the inheritance. Next, if you see, HUF is a very popular mode of estate planning in India. It has traditionally been used more for tax planning purposes, where if you set up an HUF, it enabled you to create another tax file, and it enabled ones to take the minimum tax slab exemptions. However, over a period of time, as and when the wealth has increased, but the minimum tax slabs have not increased, HUF has lost their significance from a tax planning perspective. And moreover, in 2005, there was a significant amendment in the Hindu succession law, under which even daughters started having an equal right in a HUF. That has caused a huge problem in most of the Indian families, where traditionally, especially businesses, are thought over to be taken over by the male members, and daughters are supposed to be given whatever they are given at the time of marriage, and they are not expected to be have any part in the business. So that is now causing a lot of families to redo their estate plan, undo their HUF structure, restructure them, and ensure. So HUF has also become, wherever there is an HUF in the family, one has to think through as the what implications the HUF can have on the estate plan. And last but not the least is the confusion around nomination facility. So I would like to clarify here, there is a general perception that people have, that if I have made a nomination in all my bank accounts, mutual funds, demat account, so why do I need to make a will, or why do I need to do anything, right? Let's like to clarify that nomination is important, but nominee only will get the assets or the wealth as a trustee or as a fiduciary owner. Nominee will not become the legal owner. So the legal owner of the assets will always be the person whom I have mentioned in my will as the beneficiary of that asset. Or if I have not made a will, then as per the relevant succession law. So I am not making a point that nomination is not important. Nomination is extremely important. The benefit of making nomination is that it ensures that collecting the money from the relevant financial institution becomes much easier. So one can simply provide the death certificate and a letter of indemnity to the financial institution, and the financial institution then, by either the bank or insurance company, they then transfer the money to the nominee's account. However, when I cover wills, I will reiterate that we should always align the nomination with that what you have mentioned as a beneficiary in the will. So nominee is important, but please understand, nominee doesn't become the legal owner. So what are the ways in which I can transfer my assets to whomsoever I want to give, right? So if I don't do anything, the relevant succession law will operate. What I say, through operation of law. So testamentary and non-testamentary are two legal terminologies you will always hear. Testamentary is when you have written a will, and non-testamentary is when person has died without writing a will, and hence depending upon the religion he or she belongs to, the relevant succession law applies. Just to give you an example, in case of a Hindu male dying, the assets gets equally divided between the mother, wife, and children. So if the mother is alive, wife is alive, there are two children, everybody gets 25% each. If the mother is not alive, wife is alive, two children, 1/3 each. Only wife is alive and one child, 50% each. So that is how it happens in case of a Hindu male dying. In case of a Hindu female dying, it is equally between the husband and children. So if husband is there and 2 children, 1/3 each, husband 1 child, 50% each. So that is what happens if you don't write a will. Everything will get equally divided. This is for the Hindus, and similarly there is a separate law for Christians, Parsis, and so on. What is the next way I can do is to write a will, and I will cover will in the next slide in detail, which is the most simplest and easiest way in which we can plan our estate, and which is a must. Everybody must do it at any point in time. Then I will also take you through trusts. Trusts are becoming very popular nowadays as a very effective tool of estate planning. And I will explain why is trust being used, what are the purposes why people create a trust. Family settlement is another mechanism which is primarily used in case of joint families where there are joint properties and there is a kind of disagreement in terms of who owns what portion or who owns which property, and family settlement helps people come to a common ground and ensure that the property is distributed amongst the joint owners in an amicable manner. And last but not the least is gift. So gifting is something that we can do during our lifetime. Under the current Indian tax laws, there is no tax implication when I gift any asset to my relatives, and the relative definition is pretty large under the tax law. So lot of people prefer that instead of waiting for me and the assets going to my children after I am not there, let me give it in my lifetime. And so gift is also used as a very effective medium of transferring asset during one's lifetime. So these are the different ways in one which one can plan how to transfer the assets. I'll now cover will and trust in more detail. So what is a will? A will is an intention of the person writing the will. So if you see the technical term testator is just a technical term to denote the person who is writing the will, whose will it is. Okay. For simplicity's sake, we just say the person who is writing the will or who is making the will. So will is the simplest document that all of us, if not yet done, should get it done, where we document what are the assets we own and who are the people whom we want to give the assets to. And through a will, I can give my assets to whomsoever I want, even whether a human or a non-human. I can give my assets to a charitable organization. I can give it to a corporate. I can give it to a friend, to a relative, to family members, whomsoever I want. There is no embargo in terms of, although there are restrictions depending upon the religion you belong to, but primarily I'm speaking more towards Hindus. There is absolute complete freedom. What is the requirement for making a will, a valid will? One, the person should be major. You should be of a sound mind, and you should write your will freely and willingly. These are the only requirements for making a valid will. And these are exactly the grounds on which wills get challenged. So why does a will get challenged? A will is something that I can write as many number of times as I want during my lifetime. So if I have written a will today, I can make another will after 1 year, and the latest will normally be valid as long as I have mentioned in my will that I am revoking all my earlier wills. So what happens is the will comes out in the open only once I am not there upon my death. So how do people know that the will that has been brought to the notice of everyone is actually my last will? There was no other will written after that. And that is the issue on basis which, if there are dissonance in the family, will can get challenged. And the typical grounds are that the person who made the will was not of sound mind, there was undue influence, there was coercion. So that is why what we say is people who are above 60 or 65 years of age, when they are making a will, please accompany it with a doctor certificate on the date when the will has been executed, where the doctor can certify that the person who has made the will, he is of sound mind, and that will ensure that at least on this ground it cannot get challenged. What are the other requirements for a will? When I am making my will, I need to mention somebody as an executor of the will. What is the role of the executor? The executor is the person who is responsible for transferring the assets to the various beneficiaries I have mentioned in the will. And a beneficiary can also be an executor. So there is no such thing that an executor all has to be a neutral person or an outsider. An executor can be the main beneficiary or any other beneficiary also. Beneficiary, as we all know, it is a person who will receive any benefits from the will, and they can have multiple beneficiaries. It can be an individual, non-individual, anybody whom so I want to transfer any asset that I want to do. The other most important requirement of a will is that it requires two witnesses. So again, the witnesses obviously have to be majors and of people of sound mind. The role of the witness, again, there is a lot of misconception which is there. The witness is not supposed to read the contents of the will and certify that what is written in the will is right and wrong or anything like that. The witness is only certifying that the person who has made the will, this is his signature, and most of the time he has signed in my presence, and the witnesses have signed in their presence. As I said, because the will comes out in the open after I am not there, so in case of a will getting challenged, witnesses are very, very important to certify that this was the will made by the so and so person, and this is his signature, and he had done the signature in our presence. So witness is the if you see, there is no requirement. Registration is not mandatory. There is a lot of misconception about registration, that a will has to be registered. No, will did not be registered. Even if I have made a will today which is registered, and after 2 years I make another will and I want to cancel my the other will, I just need to mention in the will that I had made an earlier will which was registered with such and such number, and I am canceling that and revoking that will. The latest will, which is unregistered, will prevail. So people think that registration of a will is compulsory. It is not compulsory. And I have already mentioned the will, to change your will, there are two ways. Either I can make an amendment to any of the clause in the will, and that is technically called as a codicil. It's just a technical term, which means in that case, if I've only made an amendment, the codicil and the original will has to be read together. The most usual way in which people make their will is they completely discard the old will and they make a completely new will, and they revoke the earlier will. So if you see, will is a very, very simple document. Depending upon the complexity of each family and how you want to transfer your assets, it is something that can be done on a plain sheet of paper, and we strongly urge everyone that you should have written your will as of like yesterday types, because this is something that, because you can change anytime. One of the other benefits of making a will is that it will ensure that you have your asset register prepared. 2-3 reasons why we have seen people not being able to make a will is: number one, everybody knows in their mind what I own and what kind of accounts I have and what kind of investments I have, what kind of properties I have, but it is not available in a standard format in a compiled manner in one place. While you're making a will, it ensures that you're able to do that compilation. Let us all imagine that we have not prepared this will and we don't have the compilation of our assets, and tomorrow we are not there. Just imagine the kind of hardships that our loved ones will have to go through, right? In just trying to figure out what are the assets that were in my name, what were my bank accounts, what were my mutual fund accounts, what were my demat accounts, and so on and so forth. Where are the property papers? So making a will also helps one to do the bookkeeping. The second reason why people usually don't make a will is they have not yet decided as to which children I want to give how much and how much I want to give. So there, our only recommendation to people is that even if you have not decided, right, today, if you don't make a will, the succession law will follow, right? As I said, in case of a male, it will go equal between mother, wife, and children. And in case of lady members, it will go between husband and children. At least mention that as a percentage. Just mention everything is equal between my so and so people I want to give. At least that will make you started in developing that. And I also keep hearing a lot of times people saying, oh, you know, we are a nuclear family, right? We are just husband, wife, 2 children. So why do we need to make a will? So I'll just give you an example of a nuclear family where even where there could be a complexity that arises. Let's assume you have a sibling, right? You have a brother and your mother is alive, right? What happens is, if you have not made a will, 1/3 of your assets goes to your mother. From your mother, it can go to your brother and other people, which may not be the intended consequence, because the mother may not have required the money, but because it comes to her and she has also not written a will, it might go to somebody else. So even though we feel that ours is a simple family, nuclear family, we don't need to write a will, we strongly urge that please do that. It doesn't require any legal paper, just a plain paper is good enough. I will just quickly just look at the three terms on this slide: probate, letter of administration, and succession certificate. This is more for knowledge. Don't get caught down with all these legal terminologies. So probate, because we all keep hearing this term, so I thought let me just unravel the mystery what it means. Probate is actually a copy of the will which is certified by a competent court and which ensures the validity and genuineness of the will. Okay. So why is the probate required? As I said, because I can make multiple wills in my lifetime, and I do not, how do people know that this is the final will? So probate is the process through which the court certifies that this was the last will and this is the valid will. And once the probate comes, the will can be treated as genuine. So the process is, and however, probate is not mandatory in all parts of India. It is primarily mandatory for people residing in Mumbai, Chennai, and Calcutta, or if anybody is owning a immovable property in these locations. So the process of a probate is that whoever is the executor of the will, they will submit the copy of the will to the local court. The court will then issue a notice to all the legal heirs and ask them either to consent on the will or to give their objections. If there are objections raised, the matter will become a civil suit, and it will become and then it has to be first decided whether the will is valid or not. And once that is decided, then only the court will issue the probate. Once the probate is issued, technically speaking, the assets can then get transferred to whoever is the beneficiary after the issuance of the probate. A letter of administration and succession certificate is just a variation of that. Letter of administration term is used in case I have died without writing a will, or where there has been no executor appointed in the will, or in case the executor appointed is refusing to take responsibility or resigns. And succession certificate is required in case there is no will and there is no property, only movable assets. So they are all like variations of each other. So what normally happens is, why people don't typically in families where there is no dispute and everything is fine, people generally don't want to go for a probate, because when you go for a probate, the court fees is normally a percentage of the assets that you need to pay. However, especially in Mumbai, it is capped at 75,000. So people in Mumbai don't mind taking a probate, because it ensures that your transfer of the asset that you get inherit is free from any kind of title this. But in all other states where there is probate is a percentage of assets, what people will normally do is they will take an NOC from most of the legal heirs, and they will take a copy of the death certificate, and on that basis they will get the assets registered in their name. The only issue there is, which is what is widely followed pan-India, only issue there is the title that you get to a property may not be clear. And under the law of limitation for another 12 years, anybody can challenge that title, saying that will was not correct and hence there's another will, or whatever grounds it can be challenged. But so that is more technical, where we keep hearing about these terms: probate, letter of administration, and succession certificate. I thought we'll just explain you what these terms normally mean. I'll now move on to trust as an option, as what is a trust, and we keep hearing about this term trust and all. First and foremost, what exactly is a trust? If you see on the left hand side, there are three terms: settlor, trustee, and the beneficiaries of income and corpus, and in the middle is a trust deed. Okay, so a trust has these three elements, right? Settlor is basically a technical term which is used to denote the person who is creating the trust and who will most likely be the transferring the assets in the trust. And trustees are the people who are managing the assets of the trust, and they are responsible for distributing the income and corpus to the beneficiaries. And beneficiaries are people who will either receive the income from the trust or the corpus from the trust. On the right side, which we see protector and advisory board, these are optional. Depending upon the complexity, this can be built in. Protector normally is appointed as a trusted family member who can remove a trustee if he is not acting in the interest of the beneficiaries. So I will explain. So let me move ahead. So trust, if you see what are the type of trusts, we are all used to hearing charitable trust, right? What do you call it as a public trust? What is the key difference between a charitable trust or a public trust and a private trust? A public trust is one where the beneficiaries are public at large. There is no specified beneficiary. It is generally for a cause. For example, charitable institutions, educational institutions, hospitals, these are under a charitable trust. And a charitable trust is normally it doesn't have any end tenure. It is for perpetuity. A private trust is one where the beneficiaries are specified. The domain of beneficiaries is well known, and normally because of tax reasons, the beneficiaries will always be family members of the person who is creating the trust. Because if you create a trust for a friend or somebody, our non-family member, there could be tax implications on that, and that's the reason mostly it is a family member. And when I say beneficiaries is specified, the beneficiary can even be specified in the manner like my children and their lineal descendants. So even my grandchildren has not been born today, my child may not have been married, but even mentioning that my children and lineal descendant is like specifying your beneficiaries. So that's the key difference between a public trust and a private trust. Within a private trust now, what could be the variations that one can create? Okay. So when I'm creating a trust, if you see the first two terms, revocable and irrevocable trust. So from the very name itself, a revocable trust means it's a trust which I have created and I have settled, transferred assets in the trust. At my will, I can at any point in time revoke the trust and take the assets back in my name. So it's a very flexible structure, gives a lot of comfort to clients. You can create the trust and take the assets back. Irrevocable trust, from the very name itself, it cannot be undone by the settler himself. Okay. So once I have created an irrevocable trust and I have transferred assets in the trust, I can distribute those assets either to the beneficiaries, or if at all I have to make changes in the trust, it can be done. But most normally it will also require consent of the beneficiaries to make the changes in the trust. So that's the difference between a revocable and an irrevocable trust. Then from the perspective of distribution of income and corpus to the beneficiaries, a trust can be a discretionary trust or it can be a definite trust. So what is a discretionary trust? A discretionary trust is one where the discretion to distribute either income or corpus or both, the time when to distribute, the manner in which to distribute, and the extent is at the discretion of the trustees. So that is a discretionary trust. The definite is exactly the opposite, where I have clearly specified the entitlement of the beneficiaries either by way of a percentage or an absolute amount. That is a definite trust. So the reason for explaining this is depending upon why you want to create a trust, and I will now take you through why people create a trust, what are the benefits of creating a trust. Depending upon your objectives, person can create a revocable trust, an irrevocable trust, and a discretionary and a definite trust. So why do people create a trust? Some of the key reasons, let's understand that. There is no order of priority. It is just, I've listed down all the reasons that we have seen people create a trust. For number one, this is estate and inheritance tax. I'm not sure if how many of you are aware. India had estate tax, which was implemented in 1953. And it was abolished in 1985. It was too premature for a country like India to have an estate tax at that point in time. And the reason why it was abolished is because at that point in time, the cost of collecting that tax was much higher than the actual tax itself. There has been a lot of buzz going around in the last, I would say, 5 years or so now, where this government may reintroduce estate tax in India. And that is causing a lot of concern. What exactly is this tax? You can also call it like a death tax, which means on my death, whatever is the wealth in my name, a certain percentage is paid to the government as tax. And this tax is applicable even in my principal component, and only the balance can be given to my children. Normally, this tax is applicable only when I am doing a transfer to a next generation, which could be either children or grandchildren. This tax is normally not applicable to a transfer done to a spouse. So a lot of people are now planning to create a trust to protect their assets from this inheritance tax. And the purpose of doing that is the simplest way to actually protect your assets from inheritance tax is you can gift your assets in your lifetime to your children. But the downside of that approach is that the children will become not only absolute owners of the asset, but they will also get complete control of the asset. Through a trust, what happens is I am willing to give away the ownership of the asset, but the control the person is able to retain indirectly by either becoming a trustee of the trust, and or by making somebody a trustee who is a trusted friend, or somebody, a relative whom you trust. So, and the second thing is, in the trust I can always specify that the income or corpus will get distributed to my children only over a period of time and may not go immediately. So that is why estate, to protect your assets from estate tax in case it gets introduced in India in future, this is used very effectively. The second reason is about asset protection. So asset protection has multiple dimensions. Asset protection, we also call it like ring fencing, right? So people who are in business and they have taken loans in the business, while taking loans, people might have given personal guarantees. And so the purpose of creating a trust is you want to transfer your personal assets into a trust, so that when you have taken a loan and for some genuine reasons the business doesn't do well, your assets are at least protected. And similarly, even for non-business people who are in profession, or people who are in practicing CAs, or people who are acting as independent directors on companies, nowadays the liabilities is very onerous. So a lot of people, to protect their personal assets from any kind of professional liability or business risk, they try and create a trust and ring fence their assets. So that's another reason why people create a trust. Marital discord. This is becoming a huge concern in a lot of wealthy families, where concern is that we don't want our children, somebody to marry our son or daughter just because we belong to a wealthy family. And in case the marriage goes bad, the entire wealth becomes part of the divorce settlement. So what a lot of people do, especially when they have daughters, they create a trust and transfer the asset in the trust, and through the trust they let their daughters get access to the income and corpus, so that in case something goes bad in the marriage, at least the wealth is protected and it is available for their children. The next, if you see, what do we call as ill effect of wealth? This is a very interesting thing that we have seen as a new thing that is coming up again in wealthy families, where one of the concerns that people have is, if I write a will and something unfortunate happens to us at an early age, our children who are very young may get access to our wealth. And if they get access to a wealth at a young age, they may not have value for money. They may become irresponsible. They may not want to work. So people don't want children to get access to wealth at a very young age. So what people in these circumstances do, they like to create a trust, and they mention that until and unless the children have achieved a certain age, let only a monthly amount be given to them for their lifestyle expenses and for their living expenses. And a lump sum can be used only for their education, marriage, and once they reach a certain age, maybe 30 years, 40 years, whatever they feel like. So this is another popular reason why people are creating a trust. Trusts are also used very effectively for succession planning in business families, especially where there are joint businesses and it is being owned by two brothers or more than two brothers. So what trust is used for is to consolidate the shareholding in one entity, so that tomorrow if anybody wants to exit the business, the decision should be a joint decision of the family, and it should not be like a decision of any one particular branch of the family. Because for business families, the combined ownership of the family business is their strength of the promoters. And there has been cases in the past where one family has sold the business to a competitor, which has completely disrupted the business. And it is also used to house your brand and intellectual property rights, and that ensures that you can monetize these assets and lease them out to various business entities of the family, and the family can then earn income out of it. Moving on, trust is also used for people who want to avoid going through the probate process, or they feel that in case my will might get challenged because I am doing an unequal distribution of wealth, so the children who are getting less may go and challenge the will, or for any other reason. Some people even don't want to go through the probate process, because when you go through a probate process, technically what happens is your will becomes public. So in that case, people want to create a trust and transfer the assets through a trust, because in case of a trust, the chances of any litigation happening is not there, since the trust is created during my lifetime and it is already run for a certain number of years in my lifetime. So this is a important reason where people have a concern that they are not comfortable with the properties going through a will, they create a trust. Incapacitation is a reason which is applicable mainly for those couples who don't have children. One of the concerns for them is if something happens to them, they get incapacitated and they are not able to use their own funds. So what do they do in that scenario? So in that case, a trust becomes a very effective mechanism where in the trust you can transfer your wealth and you can appoint either a trusted friend or a professional trust company to act as a trustee, and they can then access the money to use for the medical expenses and the living expenses in case incapacitation happen. Trust is also used for those parents who have special children with special needs. In that case, trust is a very effective medium. One of the biggest concerns parents who have special child have is after they are not there, how will the financial needs of the child be taken care of? And how do they ensure that nobody will take away the money and use it for other purposes? So what they do is they will create a trust so that after that they are not there, and they can appoint trustees who are a mix of friends, relatives, or professional trust companies, and they can, that ensures that the money is used only for the child. And last but not the least, trust is also used by some people to protect their minor children and sometimes aged parents, because this is a new concern that is coming up in some of the families where now the parents are in small towns outside of cities, and it's a nuclear family here. The concern people have that if an accidental death happens and the children are still small, how do you protect the wealth for them? And that is where people create a trust so that the money can remain in the trust and be used for their living expenses. So if you see, there are different multiple reasons, and it is every family has their unique reason for creating a trust. A trust serves multiple purposes. What is important is a trust should normally be created only if one of these objectives is important for anyone and it makes sense that yes, this will add value. Will is something that should be done by everybody. And I will just take the last slide in terms of also explaining to people what are the tax implications when you create a trust and when you transfer assets to a trust, because that is also something that people like to know. So there is no income tax implications when you create a trust and you transfer any asset. So normally people ask this question, will I have to pay capital gain because I'm transferring my capital asset into a trust? There is normally no capital gain applicable, provided, as I said, the beneficiaries are all relatives of the settlor as per the Income Tax Act, and in which case there is no tax implication. Only challenge when you create a trust and you want to transfer an immovable property is that it results in payment of stamp duty, and that becomes a hindrance. So normally what people will do is they will transfer the immovable property into the trust through their will. So whenever a property is transferred into a trust through a will, there is no stamp duty. So in the will I mention that I have created so and so trust, and I want this property of mine after I am not there to go into that trust, in which case there is no stamp duty. Only wherever people objective is ring fencing and that objective is paramount, people go ahead and still transfer the immovable property by paying stamp duty. Transfer of financial assets involves minimal cost. It is normally very seamless. You can transfer money from one bank account to another. Shares of listed as well as private company also can be transferred from one demat account to another. Mutual funds, normally you get it dematted and then you transfer from a demat account to another. Even interest in partnerships can be transferred into a trust. Some people would have invested in alternate investment fund, AIFs as it is called. That transfer is subject obviously to each fund depending on their fund house approval. And the other asset class which has a challenge is a interest in an LLP. If you're a partner in an LLP, that transfer directly is difficult because registrars do not allow registration of a trust as a partner in an LLP. So in that case, if that is really important, what people do is they create a company and they make a company as a partner in the LLP, and then through that company they transfer the assets. So basically, if you see as a summary, there is no income tax implication on transfer of assets. Implication is primarily when you transfer real estate, the stamp duty part. So normally financial assets is very seamless. That can be done in a very seamless manner. I think I'll just take a couple of minutes to talk about our company. Universal Trustees is a company has been promoted by two gentlemen, Mr. Pradeep Shah and Dilip Choksi, both very known people. Pradeep was the ex-founding MD of CRISIL and Mr. Dilip Bhai was the ex-managing partner of Deloitte. We have ICICI Group as a shareholder and two foreign shareholders, Lombard Odier and Sim Group. Idea was, and the board of directors, if you see the first three people, they are all independent directors. Mr. Sinor was the first MD of ICICI Bank. Mr. Dilip Thakkar is a very renowned chartered accountant, FEMA expert based in Mumbai. And Mr. Sridhar he was the ex-chairman of National Housing Bank and the CMD of YE. And this is what we do. We provide advice on succession planning, estate planning, and we also act as provide fiduciary services of acting as executors for wills and acting as trustees for trust. So I think that's it from my side. I think we'll open it up for questions. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Pankaj, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Rupesh. There are a lot of questions which have come on chat. I'll probably start first and then we can open the house for other questions.
Sure.
So first question which has come is from Ashish. He's asked that is it important to list all the assets in the will, or can we just say all my assets or X percentage of my assets?
Okay, it is not required to list all your assets in the will. One can always make a will by saying all my assets that I own will be transferred to so and so. It's absolutely valid. Only disadvantage of doing that could be is the people who are going to get your assets. How will they find out what are the assets in your name? If that you have managed in a seamless manner by preparing a list and keeping it somewhere at home and the people are aware of it, it is absolutely fine. There is no such legal requirement that it has to be listed.
Second question is, what is the time taken to get probate?
Okay, so probate, if there is nobody challenging the will and all the legal heirs give consent to the will, normally we have seen a probate will typically take minimum 6 to 9 months. If anybody ends up challenging the will, then it becomes a civil suit. And in that case, it can take years. We really don't know, but it can go up to 10 years, 20 years. In fact, let me just take a step and tell you the genesis of creating of this company by Dilip Bhai was also this incident that happened in 2009, the Lodha Birla episode, which a lot of us will be aware of, wherein what happened, 5,000 crore worth of wealth, Mrs. Priyamveda Birla through her will had given to her chartered accountant, Mr. R.S. Lodha. Now, what was the peculiarity in that case was that Mr. R.S. Lodha, apart from being a beneficiary of the will, was also the executor of the will. Normally, we will recommend clients that if you are giving your wealth to a non-family member, you should probably have somebody as a neutral person who is a executor to the will. So we also don't know whether the will was genuine, not genuine. As expected, the other three Birla families went ahead and challenged the will. It has been more than 10 years now. Mr. Lodha is also not there, and the matter is still in court. So nobody knows whether it was a genuine case or not a genuine case. But if the probate gets challenged, it can take a very long time. I have seen Supreme Court decisions on probate where the will was made in 1972 and the person died in 1978 and the final decision is coming out in 2018, 2015, 2016.
Great. Next question is from Parimal. He asks, do you require a will to be executed for a one-child parent?
Yes, will is something that I said should be done irrespective of the number of beneficiaries in the family. If you don't make a will, what will happen is the succession law will prevail. So, and as I said, in case of, let's say, lady members, the assets gets distributed between the husband and children. There, depending upon the individual case, I can explain. Sometimes we are not able to see the complexity. We feel it is very simple, but it can still be complex. It doesn't take much. You can just pick up a piece of plain paper. If you think your estate is simple, you can just with your own handwriting prepare your own will, and just you only require is 2 witnesses to attest the will. That's all. But it's strongly recommended that you still do prepare your will. Yeah, Pankaj.
Yeah. Next question is, can the owner of the asset itself be a trustee?
Okay, so we are talking about a trust. So in case of a trust, the person who is creating the trust is technically called the settlor, okay, or let's say the owner of the asset. Yes, he can be also one of the trustees of the trust. It is absolutely fine.
Great. Sorry, there were a couple of questions from will itself. Do you require a will? Sorry, if a property is jointly held with the deceased, do you still need to probate?
Oh, yes. So, okay, very good question. And let me explain this. Okay, I think about joint accounts and joint ownership. Okay. So normally we'll have to see this separately for financial assets and separately for immovable property. In case of financial assets, normally what you will observe is the joint owner or the second owner has been added for convenience sake. Actually, that is the case also for properties, but the law differs when it comes to properties. In case of financial assets, it is normally assumed that the entire money belongs to the first holder, and it can be stated so in the will, and only in case the second holder has contributed money in the account can the person claim. Otherwise, the money, all the assets belong to the first holder. So whatever is the assets in that account, it should be mentioned in the first holder's will. In case of property, unless and until in the property document we have clearly specified the percentage ownership of the joint holders, right? It is assumed to be jointly owned, which is equally owned 50-50, in which case in my will I can only will 50% my share, and my spouse or whoever is the joint owner in his or her will has to mention for the remaining 50%. So a lot of people have this misconception that in a property, so that is where the complexity comes in case of a property, where people believe that in a joint property, my spouse was added only for convenience sake, and I can gift it to whomsoever, I can will it to whomsoever I want, but that is not the case. In case of a property, each person can only bequeath his or her own share.
Okay. Is there any cost like stamp duty, etc., on transfer of asset to trust?
So as I said, on transfer of assets to a trust, the stamp duty is applicable in case of immovable property. So if I am owning an existing property and I want to transfer to a trust, normally full stamp duty gets payable. But if I have transferred money into a trust, I can buy a new property, obviously, and obviously then that stamp duty payable is only once that is happens. In case of other assets, financial assets primarily, there is a stamp duty, but it is negligible. It is not really material. So for example, if you transfer shares of a private company in physical mode, the stamp duty payable is 0.25%. So what if the value of the company is high? We normally what people will do, they will get their shares dematted, which is a very nominal cost to get a private company into demat, and then you transfer from one demat to another.
So if you have assets outside India, do you have to create a separate trust, or you can do with one trust only?
Okay, so basically the question is about, okay, so I'll answer both for wills as well as for trust. In case somebody owns assets outside India, normally what will happen is an immovable property will always be governed by the law of the land where the property is. So if you own properties outside India, it is always advisable that you have a will also made in the jurisdiction where the property is there, because each jurisdiction may have its own specific rules and regulations as to how the transfer of property can be done. So, to also avoid complications in terms of transferring and manage it seamlessly, we normally say that have separate wills for different jurisdictions, and you can give reference of that in each other's will. Similarly, when it comes to trust, in case of trust, as per law itself, an Indian trust can only own Indian assets. It cannot own an asset that I own outside India. So if I own an asset outside India, I necessarily will have to create a trust outside India, or I can continue to own it in my individual name.
Okay. So there are a lot of questions. So for a partnership company, can one of the partner pass on his partnership share in a will?
Yeah, so yes, both. If I have an interest in the partnership, it will be governed both by the partnership deed as to how the partnership deed has been structured in case of retirement or death of a partner, and under law, if the partnership provides for it, I can transfer my interest in a partnership through the will to whomsoever I want to. Similarly, if I create a trust in my lifetime, with the consent of the other partners, I can transfer my interest in partnership in the trust. So that trust will then become a partner in the partnership.
There are a few questions around trust, which are like, what are the tax implications of assets once it is transferred to the trust and there is an income on that assets?
Okay.
Who will bear the income tax? That is number one.
Okay.
Number two, can the trust sell the assets? If yes, who it will accrue to the settler or to the trustee, to the beneficiary?
Okay.
Is there any challenges associated with management of trust?
Okay. So let me first answer the question on taxability of income of a trust. Okay.
एकच 5 मिनिटं जरा.
So in case of a revocable trust, as I said, a revocable trust is something that once I have created and transferred the asset, I can take the asset back in my name. So under current tax law, income of a revocable trust is included in the income of the owner of the asset. So it is basically a tax avoidance measure. So whatever is the asset that I transferred in a revocable trust, income will get clubbed in my income itself. So there is no difference in tax. There is absolutely no difference in tax. In case of an irrevocable trust, it will depend upon whether I have made a definite trust or I have made a discretionary trust. In case of a definite trust, the income will get included in the income of the beneficiaries of the trust, according to whoever are the beneficiaries. And in case of a discretionary trust, the income gets taxed at the maximum marginal rate, which currently is 30%, and the surcharge will be applicable as per the income of the trust. So if you really see, there is no income tax either advantage or disadvantage in case of a private trust. It is kind of tax neutral, especially for most of the people who have already in their individual file already have availed of the minimum slab of income tax, which has a lower slab rates. So like now in 1920, the lower slab rates have got increased from 10 lakh up to 15 lakhs. So if my individual income has crossed 15 lakhs, which means I've already entered the maximum marginal rate, I will be indifferent between a trust and my owning the asset in my name. So it is kind of a tax neutral structure. Pankaj, what was the second question you asked on?
Is there any kind of challenges in management of trust?
Okay, so in managing a trust, there are no challenges at all. Unlike a company which has a lot of statutory requirements of filing this form, that form, in case of a trust, there is nothing. Trust is treated like an individual only. So just like individuals, we only have to file a tax return at the end of the year. Same thing happens in case of a trust. You only have to file a tax return at the end of the year. There is no other such compliances that is there, and it is pretty easy to manage a trust.
Okay. Can the settler be a trustee, and can there only be one trustee in the private trust?
Okay, so normally, in case there are individual trustees, you need to have minimum 2 trustees in case of a trust. And in case there is a corporate trustee, you can create a private company, or you can have professional trust companies. Then even a single trustee is good enough. And the settler can also be a trustee. I've explained that settler can be a trustee. In fact, a settler can also be a beneficiary in certain circumstances. It is not necessary that a settler cannot be a beneficiary.
Okay. I think I have taken most of the questions. If I'm missing somebody, they can raise their hand and unmute them.
Okay,
you can probably just put in chat that I'll unmute them.
I have got a question.
Yeah.
Rupesh, I just wanted to know that can will supersede the Succession Act?
Okay.
That is the first part of it.
Yeah.
The second part is that you have already differentiated between the will and trust.
Yeah.
But can you take it through once again, please?
Okay. So that's the purpose of a will, that a will does supersede the succession law. In fact, will is also a creation under the succession law, where in case of especially Hindus, it provides that a Hindu can decide however he wants to give his will to whomsoever he wants. So if I have made a will, the will prevail. If I have not made a will, then the succession law will prevail. Okay. So that's the thing. Now, basic difference between a will and a trust is, will is something which is, I would say, a very basic document that everybody should have in terms of capturing how I want my assets to go. Trust should only be created if the objectives that I had listed in the presentation, right? If one of those objectives are important and it is significant for somebody as a family or for an individual, only then one should go for a trust, because a trust is meant to meet a certain objective and a certain specific thing. Otherwise, will is something that should anyways be done, invariably be done.
Next question is from Kanaya Rathi. I'll just unmute him.
Yeah.
Kanaya.
Thank you, Pankaj. Thank you, Rupesh, for the presentation. I think it was been very, very informative. And my question was, first question Pankaj already asked, which was about the assets which are in India versus the assets which are outside India.
Yeah.
Other question I had is that how long does it take to create a trust, and how much does it cost?
Okay, so creating a trust in our experience has taken anywhere from around 3 to 6 months, because creation of a trust, one of the biggest challenges is, as I said, trust is a very flexible document, and you can structure the trust the way you want it, in terms of giving the assets after a certain period of time, giving something, some income now, some income later. So creation of a trust will require a little bit of deliberation in terms of how you want to structure it, and that is where it takes a little bit of time. So to finalize the trust deed is normally a legal document which comprises of 15-20 pages. You have to mention all that, and after you have created the trust, normally it takes another couple of months to apply for the PAN card and open the bank account and demat account. So normally that has been our experience of creating a trust. Will, as I said, it can be done in the next 1 hour after this call. We can just pick up a piece of paper and just write down as to whom you want to give what, and you only require 2 people to witness the will.
Any idea on the cost?
So cost will differ depending upon who is helping you get it done. It can range anywhere from 1.5 lakhs, and if you go to a very top law firm, it can even cost you up to maybe 8 lakhs, 10 lakhs.
Okay, thank you, Rupesh.
Yeah.
Next from Ashish. Ashish. Pankaj.
Thanks, Pankaj. Rupesh, see, we are all talking about assets. So what will, if suppose somebody has liability as well, that is a personal loan, either from bank or from some individuals.
Yeah.
So what will happen to those liabilities if nothing is mentioned in will, or disproportionately mentioned in will?
Okay, so first and foremost, yeah, you're right. Normally, in your will, you should mention your liabilities, and the most recommended method is, first you should mention that all the liabilities should be paid off, and only out of the remaining assets is what should get distributed to the beneficiaries. In case somebody misses to mention this, this can become a reason of disputes as to from whose part of assets should the liability be borne, or will it be proportionate and all. So it can lead to disputes and all within the family. So ideally speaking, you're right. The liabilities is something that should normally is mentioned as a part before the assets are mentioned as to whom the assets will go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Next from Nikhil Singhi.
Yeah, very interesting presentation. Just a couple of questions. Suppose the objective is one is avoid inheritance tax in the future. Number one. Second is to avoid litigation. Then would an HUF also serve the purpose for these two elements, or will a trust be more secure?
Okay. So let's understand an HUF better. A very good question, because HUF is something. So what happens in an HUF, if you see, the share of the beneficiaries is predefined by law. And as I said, now daughters also have an equal right in the HUF. So what happens from an inheritance tax perspective, if I have created an HUF and let's say I am survived by my 2 children and my wife, normally it will be like each one of us have 1/4 share in the HUF. So inheritance tax is most likely to be levied on my death on my 1/4 share in the HUF. However, having said that, we need to understand that today inheritance tax is not there in India. So actually what will be the implications of inheritance tax, we will come to know only when the tax is introduced. But most likely the view is that in an HUF, on what is my share, on my death, on that portion, the inheritance tax will get levied. Now, what was the second question? Sorry, I just missed that.
No, the same part. If it's litigation, does HUF protect from litigation, the assets from litigation as well?
No, see, litigation is something that can happen anywhere. And nowadays, I'll tell you, in HUF, after this amendment, a lot of times it is not clear. Now, I'll give you a very simple question, which we have checked with different lawyers, and we have not got a single correct answer. A single correct answer means a consistent answer. So, for example, me, my wife, and my 2 children are right now the members and co-partners of an HUF. Now, my son also has 2 children, and my daughter also has 1 child, right? Now, do my grandchildren also become co-partners, or they are not co-partners? The view we have got is, in case of male child, the grandchild becomes a co-partner. but in case of a daughter's child, he or she doesn't become a co-partner. So what is this resulting into is what we need to be careful about, and that's what we tell clients is HUFs can in the long run now become a bone of contention in families. So until and unless it is really important to have the HUF, we recommend that probably you can achieve the same objective by creating a trust.
Thanks.
Yeah, Pankaj, you have to unmute yourself.
We'll take last two questions. Salil Chokshi. Salil Chokshi. Okay, looks like he's not there.
Yeah, it's just 1 second, he's coming. Yeah, please go ahead. I think Mr. Choksi's wife will be there. Ma'am, please go ahead and ask. We are not able to hear her, I think.
Yes. I think we'll take next and then we can come back to her.
Yeah.
Prakash Bogi.
Thanks, Rupesh, for the presentation. My question is related to the insurance. So right now, a lot of people do take the very high insurance amount also for themselves, and they do also nominate some of the family members. So can that be also covered in the will or the trust, and how it will take impact?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, insurance is something that can be covered in the will, and whatever you mention, whomsoever you mention as the beneficiary of the insurance proceeds in the will get the insurance. And same thing, insurance proceeds can also be assigned to a trust. Only in case of insurance, it is a gray area, especially when there was an amendment done in 2015. If I have not done a will, in case of insurance, it is still not clear whether the succession law will prevail if I have not written a will, or whether the nominee will prevail. I think this matter can only get decided once we have a court judgment on this matter. But the way the Insurance Act has been worded after the amendment done in 2015, it has left room open for interpretation that in case of insurance, if I don't write a will, maybe the nominee will prevail over the succession law. But will always prevail over succession law. That is very clear.
And what will happen to the amount to be provided in case of such ambiguity in between?
I didn't get your question. What do you mean by ambiguity?
So basically, if the insurance amount, the nominee is not there, and there is a will and there is a difference, so amount of insurance generally get paid in the 3 months time frame. So will it go to a trust kind of a thing? And once the settlement is done, then the amount will be transferred to the people or the...
Okay. So basically, see what an insurance company will do. If there is a nominee, the insurance company will transfer the money to the nominee by taking the death certificate and by taking a indemnity letter from the nominee. In case there is no nominee and it is coming under a will, then normally, as I said, in Mumbai, Chennai and Calcutta, an insurance company may insist on getting a probate, and they will release the money only after getting a probate if there is no nominee. And in case of other cities, the insurance company may still release the money by way getting an NOC from the legal heirs and the death certificate.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And the last question, which is actually by Salil on chat.
Yeah.
If a Hindu male dies after making a will, is the NOC required from his mother, who is not a beneficiary, for the probate?
No, not at all. If a will has been made and a will has been probated, and if the mother is not a beneficiary, there is no NOC required from the mother. Will prevail, and assets can be transferred to the beneficiary mentioned in the will.
Great. Thanks for the session. I'll ask Ashish to do the closing remarks.
Thanks, Pankaj. Thanks, Sapaniology. This was really informative session. All of us do want to have heard about doing will at some point of time, and every year, just don't get around it. And now I think it is a very easy thing. You have to take a piece of paper, and if any help is needed, Sapaniology is there. So
absolutely.
Please reach out to him.
Yeah. So thanks everyone, and in case if there are still any queries or clarifications which we could not address, please feel free to send me a WhatsApp. I will ensure that each one gets definitely responded to. And humble request, please make your wills for sure.
Absolutely. So that's the key message.
Yeah.
Please make a will today.
And align your nominee with your wills. nominee is equally important. Align that with your will.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Thanks. Really appreciate taking out time to attend this. Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks.
Have a great evening and great weekend. Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone.